Welcome to another episode of Full Circle with me, Onyx. And we're going to continue with the cards. I haven't, my mission, my goal, my vision statement, all that is to bring the spirit of the tarot back. I might just do like maybe a card of the day or whatever, but what is going on is the Emperor card. A lot of people don't realize that the Emperor card, big shocker, okay guys, it's the Buddha. Not Christ, but the Buddha. You want to see Christ? The Hangman. Notice the leg position. Notice the leg position. Notice the reverse teachings. Two different teachings, but we're not, the real point was divine kingship, divine authority. And we talked a little bit about that with the aces. Aleister Crowley in book 4 said, before you pick up the sword or the wand, put your crown on. He's referring to your crown chakra, which is the gateway and portal into unity consciousness, which then also brings you to enlightenment, singularity consciousness, and then all the powers of heaven and the higher realms, which is the whole point of high magic, you now have access to. You have opened that gateway, that portal, that stargate. And you get your crown given to you. You have to be the king, the ruler, the queen. They're a divine couple, a divine pairing. And it is like the heavenly realm, the higher realm bestows that power upon that individual. And then the worldly realm, the 3D reality, the kingdom of mortals, grants them that through the ritual and bestows them the physical crown. So the king must go through the same process, grooming process, as the page, the knight, the general, like the warrior, the general, and then becomes the king. Alongside that, he is being mentored by Merlin, the mage, the wizard, the counselors, the prophets, the clergy, and also the general growing up. So he's trained personally by the general. So the kingship is a rite of passage, and when you get to be at that level, the right to rule is because you were groomed for that by the Holy Church, the priest, the Hierophant, by the magician, who was kind of the scientist and astrologer and the metaphysician, who also played the Joker, which was the one who passed information through spies and secrecy but also through jest, mingled with all different types of people. So the networker. And so the king, as a young child, has all this education, all this world knowledge, all of this understanding that he grows up into and becomes king, besides having possibly a divine birthright, a divine origin, a royal family bloodline. And so all of this is part of the journey to that kingship. So the Buddha was a prince who by all the rights of the world is entitled to become king. And then he goes out into the world and sees everything, tries all this stuff, becomes enlightened, and becomes the emperor, becomes a, a divine being of, so he becomes a very noble person. So this is like character development. And so you're given powers of heaven and earth when you finally attain. So you can think of the emperor as a rival. You have attained. And even with a divine birthright, you still must go through challenges. So that's really what I want to share as far as my insights on the emperor or the king of the deck, the true ruler. And as a side note, the empress, in a weird way, she is the same thing, just in the female role, but the powers are different. Archetype speaking, women get their power from the earth. She represents all things physical, so abundance, material wealth, nurturing, like the goddess Diana with her daughter Artemis. It's nature. It's the goddess who provides animals. It's the goddess who provides us rivers with fish in it, with milk, And so her grooming process is a little different. But in a weird way, she is over all that nurtures and supports and gives. So whether it's birthing and midwifing, whether it's cultivation of the land, and magical places, she is that. And then she also gets to be like the star goddess, the great mother, ruler of heaven. So we also see everything starts with the great goddess, the dragon goddess of the Babylonian myth. She started it all. It was through her sacrifice or deep giving that the other gods spring forth. So we kind of see that in Greek mythology, Gaia and Uranus produce the Titans and all sorts of monsters, I believe. And so Gaia, in a weird way, is in charge of creating these bloodlines, these beasts, these creatures. And so nothing can happen without the emperor and the empress. And then in the smaller reflection of the lower arcana or the lesser mysteries, the kings, the four kings and the four queens are all subject to the emperor and the empress. So it's like there is a fifth element suggested. Who is the queen of queens, the empress? Who is the king of kings? The emperor. Emperors rule over kings. Empresses rule over queens. They have kingdoms under their power. So when we see the tapestry, when we see a bigger picture played out in our world and in the heavenly realm, we can gain deeper insights. So to have an empress in a card reading is to suggest more than just her position. It's also suggesting her rulership over the four queens of fire, water, earth, and air. And same with the emperor. To have an emperor there is suggesting, like in meditation, we generally assume the emperor is almost like a hot-headed bad guy in Aries, and that's as far as superficial readings go. Is fortune telling, a man of power, possibly in Aries, someone who has authority, someone with a hot temper. We don't, wait a minute, this person is also a Buddha. This person has divine access to greater knowledge, who in a weird way is then subject to a higher power. The true meaning of authority is you surrender yourself and receive orders on high. So the pharaohs are semi-divine beings, half mortal, half god. At one point, they were totally gods, the pharaohs. But as the connection to the divine breaks, we then have humans instead of gods and semi-divine. So the pharaoh takes his orders from Ra himself, or Horus, or Osiris, the universal consciousness, source energy, Christ, whatever you want, God, whatever that source is, the king must become the servant. And we don't realize this. So in a reading, the emperor could actually represent someone who is taking orders from a higher power, someone who has prophetic abilities, someone who has psychic abilities, someone who has a vision, and they're in charge of, being the organized leader to give out jobs. So this person might have a speaking position in a company, ordering people, telling them what to do, kind of like a CEO level. So, and same with the empress, in a way. We have to look at light goddesses and dark goddesses, and kind of the cards around the empress card. Is she a dark goddess? Is she cutting off heads and be in a warrior mode? Is she bringing enlightenment through the destruction of the ego? Or is she a nurturing goddess? Is she bringing gentle words of grace and compassion that remind us of the softer sides of our divinity? And so you could say, if there's many empresses, queens in a reading, they might be doing the greater work of the empress. So the card that is hidden is the empress. So, and speaking of the emperor actually being the Buddha, the empress can become not so mundane. Usually she's lounging around with maybe a cup of wine. She's in worldly decadence of wealth, riches. When she gets the same right of that divine intuition, that third eye operation, She is a high priestess as well. Um, but she's fit to rule the lower plane. So she's standing in the goddess's stead. And goddess, as all mother, has all these different abilities. So we can see a multifunctional goddess. This is like, I'd almost say kind of like a Wonder Woman. Uh, Wonder Woman has a lot of different abilities uh, that go unrecognized, besides, just hanging out with the boys and fighting crime and bringing justice to a corrupt world. Like her and Batman are on a fool's errand. So you can take your favorite living myths of like the DC universe, or Marvel universe, or Vampire Diaries, and plug in your archetypes, your cards, and see how they're played out in fiction. Like Star Trek, we get the Borg Queen. She is the empress of a fleet of Borg ships, and she has that collective mind going. So, and it's a devouring, assimilating goddess, all under my rule, all under my command. But it's also in servitude. I shouldn't say servitude, but it's all in service of the collective good. She has all those voices, all those memories, all those abilities that she's tapped into. And in a weird way, she is a servant to the many voices. And so the Borg Queen is actually a really good uh, character to research um, what it is like to be an empress. So you want to be an empress. You want to be the manager of your company. Uh, you have to be in touch on an intuitive level and direct level. You have to be able to have really good communication skills, and you have to serve them their needs in order for you to keep their position. We can look at this queen, goddess, woman in charge archetype through different ages, through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s currently. And we can see the female president is kind of supposed to take that role. But under the Christian God theme pattern, she takes a silent position and is more of just a supporting role. And really the opposite could be happening. I think Michelle Obama is a really great example of the Empress card in a positive role. When you look at some of the stuff that she's done, and she stood alone as her own figure, where I feel like most presidents, whether they got popular or negative, light put upon them didn't really showcase a female figure. But I think Michelle Obama did really well, and Eleanor Roosevelt is another really good person who has that sovereignty. So I think probably I would put the keyword sovereign as the empress. You can have sovereignty is something you're kind of born with. And it doesn't matter what station or class you're in. But someone who has dignity, someone who has an inner wisdom, someone who has a grander heart, a grander mind, they naturally embody the archetype of the sovereign. And it just shows. Doesn't matter, like, you could all be like very poor people, but the way that person carries themselves and the way they relate and understand people gives them a sense of dignity. And people live in their grace. So grace would be another key word to put with the Empress, and we don't see that in superficial readings. Um, so, and this would then be the lower reflection would be these queens, which are typically the fixed signs of the zodiac. There is a universal grace that comes with being Taurus, that comes with being Leo, that comes with being Scorpio, and comes with being Aquarius. And the grace is the connection to the divine that they have. They're very powerful signs. And when that sign doesn't recognize all that comes through them is in service to others, uh, their connection to love, their connection to abundance and beauty, their connection to wisdom and psychic abilities, their intention, uh, their brilliant minds, and their intuitive knowing powers. They're they're gifts for them, but they're also gifts to reshape the world. And it's emperors and empresses that really have the power. The presidents, the ones, the higher ups, CEOs, big people. And so I would say some of this grace trickles down to the queens and trickles down to the pages. In Crowley's deck, he turned them into princesses. And so some of this divine authority, which is another form of grace, when you really consider you're working with a higher power through the emperor, trickles down and reflected in the cardinal signs of the kings. And some of that glow, some of that grace, some of that authority is seen in Aries, in Cancer, in Libra, and Capricorn. And then trickles down to the knights. So we do see the gender polarity, but we have both polarities. So we could say the feminine grace and the masculine authority. It doesn't matter, for however that reading is. Polarities will always be, but we always get to embody both. And so the Kabbalah teachings have always saw the source energy as both gendered. The god and goddess is one. It doesn't polarize until it moves farther down to planes. But then as it trickles all the way down to the lowest plane, Earth, everything is received there. So it's kind of in a mixed bunch, as we see in our world, all the diversity, all the multiplicity, all the parallel realities and dimensions. It all comes back to us just kind of in a beautiful jumbled mess. Versus, so it comes back to us down as a rainbow, but it starts as that pure white light of undifferentiated singularity. And you can flip this on its head and realize we receive it all. And so we can gather that and create like a mini singularity in the present moment. We can become the undifferentiated light, the clear white light, the rainbow body of the world card. And we can literally bring heaven to earth as earth is in heaven. So in the spiritual community, there's a lot of ungrounded psychics. There's a lot of people living in the second sphere of visions, definitions. So like when people are like channeling different entities and ETs, like Syrians and Octurians, and these different entities, archons, that might go under the name of Abraham and Bashar and things like that, or angels, even my own personal angel, the visions of the angel, hearing the words. This is all at the second sphere, just above the material plane. And the second sphere is the storehouse of images and rules the subconscious. So psychology is also ruled in the second sphere. We are all 10 spheres, but the reality is images cease after the second sphere and you move up into the third sphere. It's different. And so we really don't, our human perception and our five senses are limited to a very small band of information. And as we barely move out of that band and expand it, I would say some of the greatest psychics ever lived, Edgar Cayce would be one, uh, of noteworthy mention, was able to move, like, they're still within the second sphere. Um, Carl Jung, I think a lot of his work of archetypes and the the shadow self and the golden shadow and the other, the him, the her, the inner child, all this really cool psychology is still within the realm of the second sphere. We don't really move past it until we unscramble those holographic fractile like images and turn them back into pure energy, pure reflections of source energy, maybe as frequencies, when we start working with the other spheres. And so it's weird. We work so hard to gain these intuitive psychic abilities, especially clairvoyance is really sought after, and clairaudience. Um, but they're great. I mean, I sure enjoyed playing in the astrals and some of the different ethers. Um, but then you have to be like Odin and give up your eyes in order to see. So the shamanic death of having to have parts and pieces removed, old tools. So to transcend the second sphere, the sphere of the moon, the silvery mirror. So even in, I would say, psychology, where everyone's all about projection in the new age world, and they're all about you're a mirror and you're a reflection of me, and the that's like the end of like new age psychology. And they're not really taking deeper responsibilities or deeper looks past the image, past the glamour, like even our concept of oneness, when we realize, oh, we're all the same and we're all parts and pieces of each other. It's still, the realization is possibly happening at the lowest levels, second level, the sphere of the moon. And so there is a tree within the tree. So here we are in the 10th sphere, exploring the the ninth sphere. Sorry, because if we're using the Kabbalic number system, we're at number 10, and the sphere of the moon is 9. So that would be the ninth sphere. So that isn't very much progress when you have 11 spheres in this dimension. And then when you transcend that, you move into the second sphere. And then you got 11 more to go. You transcend that, you move into the third. I'm going, Earth is 1, the moon is 2, Mercury is 3. So it's very interesting. So at the height of your enlightenment, of working through the 10 spheres in the 10th sphere, you still need to jump into the actual sphere of the moon. So it's very interesting. Trees within trees. So that's when you have to allow your intuition to come from the silence. To wrap it up, come from the silence, come from the stillness, come from the darkness, that clean canvas of no thought, no mind, where you can receive downloads that you can't rationally comprehend, but become valuable tools of information, keys of wisdom within your readings. So you can't use your senses and your logical mind to validate it all. And it's not really going on faith. It's learning how to swim with different senses to navigate dark waters of infinite. So, may the Emperor and the Empress bless you on your journey. May you obtain your crown, your third eye, and may your readings have more content, more quality, because they're infused with deeper knowledge. Feels great. Have a good day.